Thank you for being with us today. I'm Brian Tier, pastor of Tyler Road Baptist Church. We are in the book of 1 Corinthians, chapter 8 and chapter 9 today. And actually, chapter 10 goes with it. So if you're doing your pre-study for your Sunday school lesson, be sure that you join all of these together. We'll cover that next time. But what we're talking about here is not offending a brother or not offending the lost, so that we can share the gospel with them, and how we live can be a roadblock to some people if we're not real careful what we do and the liberties that we take. And we're talking about the freedoms that we have in Jesus Christ. Now, what I find fascinating about this is when we were going through the book of Galatians, Paul was warning them about being too legalistic. Now, with the Corinthian church, he's talking about being too free. Okay, there's a fine line that we as Christians walk, because we are saved. We are children of God. We always will be. We will, if you've trusted Christ as your Savior, you will get to heaven. That's really good. All right. I don't want to say that's good and bad, but that's super good for us, right? Because we know that we are not perfect. But what can happen a lot of times is, as Christians, we can become too legalistic to where people start thinking, and this is what it really boils down to, even in Galatia. He was worried not so much for their salvation, but he was worried about those that were coming after them, thinking that they were going to have to do something else, keep the law, do this or do that routine in order to be saved. Okay? And on this end, with the Corinthian church, that their lives were going to be so illicit that it was going to cause some people to stumble and not be saved. All right? And so you can go to one extreme or the other. The main thought here is what Jesus gave us, the command that Jesus gave us whenever he was sitting with his disciples at the end of the book of John. And he said this several times during his ministry. But, one of the times was the greatest commandment. Whenever the Pharisees were questioning him on what was the greatest commandment, do you remember what he said? That's right. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And the second is like unto it, love your neighbor as yourself. All right. And whenever Jesus was sitting with his disciples, he says, this new commandment I give to you, love one another. This is the premise behind how we live our Christian life. Abstaining from all appearances of evil, which is a command that we're given by God, is not so that we can keep our salvation, or if we don't do it, we'll lose our salvation, but it more importantly has to do with how our lives and our testimony appears to others, okay? How we look. And we need to understand the most important job, the most important task that we have is to be a witness of the gospel of Jesus Christ before all. Jesus, the way that Jesus lived, nothing Jesus did would have kept him from being the Son of God or made him more the Son of God. He was the Son of God, no matter what. And yet, as we look at his lifestyle, the things that he did shows us, and that's the reason why it's so important to study the life of Christ. That is what it looks like. Remember, John told him whenever he came to be baptized, John the Baptist said, Lord, I need to be baptized of you. And Jesus says, hey, John, the important thing here is that we show what true righteousness looks like. So let's do it the way that God has said, so that I'll be a testimony to others. Jesus didn't need to be baptized, not in any respect, okay? But he did it for our benefit, for our example, that we should follow after him. And that is, if you want to say, not to be legalistic, it's to be Christ-like. That's what we need to shoot for. All right, so Paul is going to dive into this in these next chapters, and he had already started this a little bit before, and we're gonna get into it even deeper next time as well. This is a lot of passage to cover, so let's dive in here. Chapter 8, 1 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 1. Now, as touching things offered unto idols, we know that we all have knowledge. Knowledge puffs up, or it makes you prideful, but charity edifies. Now, this is pretty something. All right, when you think about puffing something up, you think about air. You know, knowledge is like air. But what love does is it builds up. It gives you a foundation. It's more stable. All right. So we have one that's knowledge is unstable. Charity, however, is very stable. We're doing it out of love. Some things that we do, we think, well, I know what we're supposed to do here. But we're not looking at it from the angle of, is this showing love for my brethren? Now, what he's talking about here is idols and the meat that they would eat. They would eat that was given to idols. And the people in the church of Corinth were like, idols aren't anything. They knew the knowledge. Idols aren't anything. Therefore, we can go in there and the meat was cheaper. So it's not going to affect us in any way, shape, matter, or form. If we eat meat to idols, that's okay. But the thing is what they were causing is they were causing other people that were watching them to stumble. They weren't thinking about their testimony with others, and they were like, well, they just don't understand. I've got the knowledge. Well, do you? That's the question, because what they were doing was causing other people not to come to Christ. And this is what the premise here is behind this. He says, if any man think that he knows anything, he knows nothing, yet as he ought to know it. All right, so it has to be contingent on love. The knowledge that you have has to be contingent on love. And so we need to think about, not only is this right or wrong, but also, how does this look to the world around me? Is this helping them out? And if it's not, if your freedom brings someone else into bondage or can keep someone from being free, we need to think about that. Okay? Don't just do it because you say, well, it's definitely not going to lose my salvation by doing something like this. Well, maybe not. But is it keeping someone else from being saved, what you're doing? Because your life does have an effect on other people. And he says, if you think that you know, you probably don't know. And that's always the key to this too. And that's brought up many times in the scriptures as well. But if any man love God, the same is known of him. So that's the basis, okay? If any man loves God, the same is known of him. As concerning, therefore, the eating of those things that are offered in sacrifice to idols, we know, knowledge, that an idol's nothing in the world, and there is none other God but one. For though there be that are called gods, whether in heaven or in earth, as there be gods many and lords many, but to us there is one God and Father, of whom are all things, and we in him, and one Lord Jesus Christ, by whom are all things, and we by him. So the sound doctrine is that we know there's many gods in this world, in heaven and earth. They had gods everywhere, especially in those days, especially in our day. Okay. He says, but we know that there's only one God, and Jesus Christ is part of God. He is God as well, by whom are all things, and we are by him. He says, that's correct. What you're saying there is correct. I'm not saying that your doctrine is bad. Howbeit, there is not in every man that knowledge. Not every man knows that. To some, especially in those days that may have been coming out of idolatry, they're not fully aware that these gods are nothing. And so this is going to cause them to have problems. Some places, we could go anywhere, we could eat anything under the sun. It's not going to affect our salvation one way or another. We know that Jesus even talked about this with his disciples, that food is nothing. You know, the things that you put in your belly, that doesn't make you who you are. That was one of the places where the Jews were having problems on the other end. And so it was causing them issues because you could eat anything. So therefore, hey, who cares what anybody else thinks or does? And if they get mad, it's because they don't have enough knowledge. And so what Paul's saying here is that there's some people that don't have that knowledge. He says, for some with conscience of the idol unto this hour eat it as a thing offered unto an idol. For them, it still has that stench of being offered to an idol, and they don't want to have any part of it. So what should we do for them? And their conscience being weak is defiled. So whenever they eat it, they feel terrible about what they've done. So what should we do for them? Say, just blow them off. Don't care about what they think. But meat commendeth us not to God, for neither if we eat are we the better, neither if we eat not are we the worse. Now this is the key to it right here. All right, the key to it is that if you eat the meat to the idols, you're not any better or worse. If you don't, you're not any better or worse. So therefore, let's err to the side. We're not really erring, but let's go to the side that's not going to be offensive to others. I remember one time being in a church where we had some Jewish folks visiting us, and we had, I think every fourth Sunday we would have a fellowship, and they would leave before the fellowship. And we were like, man, this is something else. So they wanted me to talk to them about why they were leaving. And come to find out, they were Jewish. We didn't even know that they were Jewish. And that they didn't want to eat pork. And we oftentimes had pork at our fellowship meal. And so I went and talked to the church members, and they were like, they need to get on board with that it's okay to eat pork and all this kind of stuff, because and I said, well, would it hurt anything? Do you know any other dishes other than pork dishes? Oh, yeah, absolutely. I said, well, why don't we just not serve pork? Problem solved. And we did that, and they started coming. And if I remember correctly, one of the ladies was saved as a result of it. Maybe not of that, but she was able to fellowship with us and be with us. And that's the reason, the way that you cultivate relationships is to be with people. You're not trying to offend them. Even though that they were coming to services, they wouldn't come to all of them. And so why not make it where they could? Because it wasn't hurting us in any way by not doing that. Matter of fact, it probably might have been even a help, right? But anyway, you understand what I'm saying here. All right, so verse 8, meat commendeth us not to God, for neither if we eat are we the better, neither if we eat not are we the worse. But take heed lest by any means this liberty of yours becomes a stumbling block to them that are weak. So watch what you do, because you don't want other people to stumble. So this is the question you need to ask: is what I'm doing causing others to stumble? Maybe it's not right or wrong to God if you do it or if you don't do it. But if it's something that is offensive to others, maybe we don't need to do it. And Christians are bad about this. They say, well, this or that doesn't make me one way or the other. The way I wear my hair, the way I dress, the way I, whatever. And it's like, don't you know that to some people that's offensive? Even though that, it doesn't make you any better of a Christian. It doesn't make you any worse of a Christian. So why not go to the side where it's not offensive to others? It makes sense to me, I don't understand why we would do things that could be offensive. I mean, usually, even if you go, I remember whenever I worked at the car dealership, that our owner wanted you to dress a certain way and do a certain thing. And even guys that would have tattoos or whatever, he would want those things covered up while you're at work. And why? So we wouldn't offend anyone. It was, that's what it was all about, is to make sure that you're when you go out there because some people didn't like it. And so he would make sure that we looked presentable. He wanted to make sure that we were all well groomed and all this kind of stuff. Look, we just took it as business. But the fact is we've got a bigger business than this. We're talking about the gospel message. We're talking about whether people go to heaven or hell. Shouldn't we have consideration for that and not use our freedoms as a stumbling block to others? Just don't do it. This is what he's telling them. He's saying, yeah, I know idols are nothing. It doesn't mean anything. But if it's a stumbling block to someone else, maybe we need to think about that. All right, he's going to give an example here in just a second. Let's go ahead and get through chapter 8 here. And though thy knowledge shall be, and through thy knowledge shall the weak brother perish from whom Christ died. He says, should your knowledge cause a weaker brother to stumble because of what you're doing? Just because you know that it's not anything and he doesn't know that, it still causes him. And look, I guarantee you, every single one of us have things like that in our life where we sit and we're like, I just would not do that. I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. And it wouldn't change your Christianity one way or the other. But it still is offensive to us. I think about it even the way I dress in a pulpit. I watch other preachers, jeans and sneakers and stuff like that. That's so it's okay for them, and maybe their congregations are good with that. But I could tell you something that there's some that might not take that too well. Should we just dress professionally? I'm not saying suit and tie every week or anything like that. I'm not setting a standard. I'm just saying in anything that we do, we need to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to make sure that the gospel is promoted, not us. It's not about us. It's not about what we like or what we dislike. As a matter of fact, as far as worship services go, do you know who we're worshiping there? I know there's always talk about the music that you use, whether I like it or I don't like it, or whether I like this or that. Do you realize that we're actually there to worship God? We need to make sure that more important than whether we like something or not, it's whether God likes it or not. But as far as presenting the gospel goes, we need to be aware and look around us and say, can this cause someone to stumble? Okay? You say, well, boy, there's a lot that you'd have to think about there. And there is, but is it worth it? Is it worth it? Sure it is. Because you may be keeping a brother that is weaker from stumbling, and it may also cause someone who is not saved to be saved by the way that you live, by the way your actions are, okay? Wherefore, if meat make my brother to offend, I will eat no flesh while the world stands. Paul says, I will just cut it off completely. And look, this is definitely the way it is. You go into another culture, there's things that we do that other cultures don't do. Remember whenever I went to Thailand, they have a different culture, different things that are offensive. I can remember going over with my brother, some things that he said, hey, these are things that are rude in this culture. I could have just went over and did my usual American thing. But why would I do that and try to be offensive to someone? It doesn't make any sense. It didn't have anything to do with salvation whatsoever. But why try to make it where they'll stumble? Now, another good reference point for this is Romans chapter 14. Okay, it basically outlines the same thing. And he doesn't just do food. He does days of the week. He does all of these different things. And we need to be mindful of these things. All right. Paul says, while the world stands, lest I make my brother to offend. Now, he's going to use himself as an example here in how he treated those that were in Corinth. Whenever he came there, he says, am I not an apostle? Of course, he was an apostle. Am I not free? Of course, he was free to do what he wanted to do. Have I not seen Jesus Christ our Lord? If I be not an apostle unto others, yet doubtless I am to you, for the seal of mine apostleship are ye in the Lord. He says, look, even if I'm not an apostle to everyone else in the world, I should be to you, because you came to know the Lord through me. All right, so that should be the seal that I am an apostle. And he gives the qualifications here. One of the qualifications is having seen Christ as a sign of being an apostle. He says, but basically what he's saying is, you guys know that I'm an apostle. But look at this. He says, mine answer to them that do examine me is this: have we not power to eat and to drink? And this isn't just talking about to idols. This is talking about living. Don't we have the power to, don't I have the authority to eat and drink? And obviously, even the apostles had to eat and drink. Have we not power to lead about a sister, a wife, as well as the other apostles as brethren of the Lord and of Cephas? He says, don't we have the power to have to be able to take care of a wife or a sister or someone else? In other words, we have to have money in order to do these things, just like the rest of the apostles do. Or I only and Barnabas, have not we the authority or power to forbear working? Are we the only ones that have to get out and make a living for what we do? Who goeth a warfare any time at any charges, or who plants a vineyard and eats not of the fruit thereof, or who feeds a flock and eats not the milk of the flock? All right, so he says, look, even if you're going to warfare, you take some of the plunder, okay? Or someone takes care of you while you're out there being a soldier. If you plant a vineyard, you eat the grapes from the vineyard. If you feed the flock, then you get to partake of the flock at some point in time or another, okay? Say I these things as a man, or saith not the law the same also? He says, this isn't just about being an apostle. He says, this is the way it is. And, it's like us, it would say, at least we should be getting minimum wage for what we do. For as it is written, verse 9, in the law of Moses, thou shalt not muzzle the mouth of the ox that treads out the corn. All right, so even the law of God speaks of this. And that is, don't muzzle the ox that treads the corn. In other words, whenever you were out there plowing with an ox, if he could, you don't put a muzzle over his mouth. Allow him to go over there and reach and take some of that corn every once in a while, because he deserves even to eat. All right, be sure you take care of your ox. Now, Paul's likening himself to an ox. All right, and so what he's saying here basically is that you guys should be taking care of our necessities, and I did not require that of you. That's what he's going to get into here. Or saith he it altogether for our sakes? For our sakes, no doubt, this is written, that we that plows should plow in hope, and he that thresheth in hope should be partaker of his hope. If we have sown unto you spiritual things, is it a great thing if we shall reap your carnal things? So he says, look, we're trying to implant in you, and we did implant in you spiritual things, and so you should provide us the carnal things that we need so that we can in turn insert the spiritual things into your life. In other words, take care of those that feed you spiritually, okay? Make sure they share in what you're gaining carnally, fleshly, so that they can take care of your spiritual needs. Just like your ox gets out there and plows your garden for you, make sure that you take care of that ox. Make sure you take care of those that take care of your spiritual needs. If others be partakers of this power or authority over you, are not we rather? And what about us? Nevertheless, we have not used this power, even though I had this authority to use over you. That's what the word here, power, in all of these cases is authority, exousia. But suffer all things lest we should hinder the gospel of Christ. So Paul says, we did not take anything from you, not that we couldn't, we could have, and you should have taken care of our needs. And Paul is in another place going to say, we did you wrong by not doing that. But Paul says, we didn't do it so that no one would think that we were doing this for money. We went out there and we made tents. We did what we had to with our hands to make sure that we provided the food for you, the sustenance for you, the spiritual food that is. He says, but, verse 13, do ye not know that they which minister or serve about holy things live of the things of the temple? So even the priest would get partial pieces of the sacrifices and of the meal and the wine and the oil and everything that people brought up there. Part of it was given to the Lord and in the temple and burnt, and part of it was given to the priests. Most of it was given to the priests so that they were provided for. Paul says that's the way that it has always worked, and that's the way that it will continue to work. And this is the way that we provide for our ministers, those that serve the table. Make sure that we take care of them. But Paul says we didn't do it so that we wouldn't be offensive to you. You weren't grown enough in order to do this. Look, this is the way that our missionaries are taken care of in many cases. Most of the time, they're taken care of by churches that are spiritually grown, even though that they may be in a foreign country, because the people of the foreign country or wherever they may be, not even a foreign country, but anywhere that they go, any mission point that they go has to grow to a certain point before they'll start giving, and so that they'll start providing for their pastor. But they need to learn that themselves, and we all have to learn that, don't we? That's a good lesson to learn. And so a lot of times missionaries will come on the field, and even pastors do this. They're bivocational, because the church either is unwilling to or cannot provide for their physical needs. And so they go out and they work. But it should be the goal of every church to make sure you provide everything that you can to take care of the pastor, the minister that you have. Okay? That's what it should be. And when he's not what he's doing it for, and he continues to serve you and do the things that he's doing, what he's doing is he's doing it for an example for you. And that's what Paul was doing here for Corinth. And he could have demanded. We could just go in there and say, hey, I'm taking care of your spiritual needs. Now I need y'all to take care of my physical needs. Okay? Verse 13, do we not know that they which minister of the holy things live of the things of the temple, and they which wait at the altar are partakers with the altar? Even so hath the Lord ordained that they which preach the gospel should live by the gospel. What we're supposed to be living off of is the message that we preach. Remember when Jesus sent his disciples out 2 by 2, he says, I don't want you to take a sack with you. I don't want you to take a script with you. I don't want you to take any of that stuff. Go out there, and if they don't provide for you, shake the dust off your feet and go somewhere else where they'll take care of you. Okay? This is the ultimate goal, is that's the case. But Paul said we did not do that while we were there. He says, but I have used none of these things. I've not used any of this power over you. Neither have I written these things that it should be so done unto me. He says, I've never told you that you need to do this unto me. For it were better for me to die than any man should make my glorying void. For though I preach the gospel, I have nothing to glory of. For necessity is laid upon me. Yea, woe is unto me if I preach not the gospel. Paul says, look, I'm going to preach the gospel whether or not you guys pay me or not. And that's what I wanted you to know, is that the message was more important to me than any carnal thing that you could give me. Now, this relates back to what we were talking about with the eating of the meats offered to idols. You say, well, how does that all tie in? It ties in like this, that Paul was willing to do what he had to do in order for the gospel message to go forth. And we need to do the same thing if it means that we have to starve sometimes, or we have to go out and get a job sometimes in order to make ends meet, it's worth it. It's worth it. And woe is me if I don't preach the gospel. There's going to be some sacrifices that are going to have to be made to preach the gospel. Not everything is like it's supposed to be. And you're going to face people that are going to think that this is wrong and that's wrong. And you're going to know in your heart that they're okay to do. And you're going to have to say, you know what? I'm going to abstain from that so that I'm not offensive to them until they grow to a certain point and can receive the teaching. And this is what the church at Corinth was going through. And Paul is just now bringing this about. He says, I've not wrote to you about this, that you would take care of me, but I'm going to show you that I've done what I'm telling you that you need to do. And sometimes it's a sacrifice, right? All right. This is 17. For if I do this thing willingly, I have a reward. But if against my will, a dispensation or stewardship of the gospel is committed unto me. The gospel has been committed unto it. We're the managers of the gospel going out. And he says, that is the most important thing to me. What is my reward then? Verily, that when I preach the gospel, I may make the gospel of Christ without charge, that I abuse not my power in the gospel. He says, I will do it without charge. The giving to the preacher should be with a willing heart, and because he's going to preach the gospel no matter what. Because woe to us if we don't preach the gospel. We're going to preach it no matter what. But that doesn't mean to go out and starve him. Okay, it means that we need to, if he's preaching the gospel and he's teaching you the right way, he's worth double whatever honor that you can show to him. Paul teaches that as well. But he's going to preach the gospel regardless of what it cost him. All right, and so you have to realize that if you've got a man that's willing to preach the gospel to you, under whatever circumstances, you better treat him good. You better honor him. I'm not talking about somebody that's a despot or anything like that. I'm talking about somebody that preaches and teaches God's word, that's willing to minister to you in whatever way that he's willing to minister to you. Take care of him. Because our reward is to preach the gospel. We've been entrusted with that, and that's what we're going to do, regardless of the benefits, okay? Because our benefits are outside this world. Verse 19, for though I be free from all men, yet have I made myself servant unto all, that I may gain the more. He says, I'm free. I don't have to do any of this. I'm free to do whatever I want, just like you're free to do whatever you want. But I am willing to do this. I've made myself a servant unto all men. And remember what I told you at the beginning, isn't this what Jesus did? He made himself a servant who was free to rule and reign from heaven for all eternity, but he stepped out of heaven. And we need to be pictures of the same thing. We need to be pictures of Christ, willing to serve no matter what. And Paul knew both how to suffer hunger. He knew how to, okay, I'm going to go ahead and go, but that's in Philippians chapter 4. Go ahead and read that. I don't want to lose you here, because this is very important. Actually, let's just skip down to verse 23. He said, and this, because this is the conclusion, and this I do for the gospel's sake, that I might be partaker thereof with you. What is he doing it for? For the gospel's sake. He wants to get the good news out to everyone. That should be the plight of every believer, is to put the gospel out, that I might be partaker thereof with you. Know ye not, this is another illustration, know ye not that they which run in a race run all, but one receives the prize? Now, look, it takes training to run a race, doesn't it? If you go out and you run a marathon, 26.3 miles, then you got to train for that. You put your body through all kinds of things so that you can win the race, but only one person wins, right? You go through it. I remember I worked for a good friend of mine, and he trained for the Ironman competition, and he did it for several years. Boy, and what a training! He get up super early. The way that he ate, everything he did was just, I mean, it's good. It was really good to see. This is what Paul's talking about. But he wasn't thinking he was going to come in first. I mean, he was thinking about completing the race, right? He was training so he could complete the race, because there's a huge ordeal. Know ye not that they which run a race run all, but only one receives the prize? So run that ye may obtain. Okay, we need to run so that we can obtain, so that we can make it through. And every man that striveth for mastery is temperate in all things. In other words, he has to go through all of this running training. Now they do it to obtain a corruptible crown. What are they doing this for? So that they can get, only one person's going to win, and that person's going to get a medal. But that's temporary. That's not eternal. As a matter of fact, they're probably going to go try to do it again, because it's one of those fleeting moments. It happens, but you're like, okay, now I need to see if I can do it again, and I need to see if I can do it again. Every man that striveth for the mastery is temperate in all things. He has to temper his body to get it in subjection to do that. Now they do it to obtain a corruptible crown, but we an incorruptible. They're doing it for a corruptible crown. What we're doing for the gospel is for an incorruptible crown, something that will last for eternity. I think that's probably more important, don't you? I therefore so run, not as uncertainly, so fight I. Not as one that beats the air, but I keep my body and bring it into subjection, lest that by any means, when I have preached to others, I myself be a castaway. Paul says, look, what I'm doing here, I have to bring my body into subjection so that some other person might be saved. Not for a corruptible crown, but for an incorruptible. If an incorruptible crown is worth working your life for and going out there and sweating and sacrificing the things that you eat and the things you drink and all of those kind of things, if you're willing to do that for a corruptible crown, what should we be willing to do for an incorruptible crown? Should we not have that same sort of fervor people will do for sporting events and stuff? Man, they'll go out and it's for nothing. For nothing. What we're talking about is for everything. For life. Not just bio life, but for Zoe life, for spiritual life. So people will be born again. The way you live, the way you act should reflect that of Christ. As a servant, we need to be servants for Christ. And not just servants for Christ, but being a servant for Christ means that we're going to serve everyone else. And Paul said, that's what I was willing to do for you. Now, are we willing to do it for others? It's maybe the problem. Like I say, this is just we'll get into some more of this next time. But take that and think about it. Pray about it. Seek the Lord. All right. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much for this great example that Paul has given to us, that has lived thousands of years now and has been given to us. And we know the same thing, that there are certain things in our life that we do that we shouldn't do, that may be offensive to others, Lord, and we need to be watchful for those things, not because that they're going to keep us out of heaven, or not that they're going to keep you from loving us. But we need to also be loving one another. The command that you left for us and that you gave to your disciples was that we love one another. And we know that we cannot love you. We do not love you if we do not love our brethren, according to 1 John chapter 4. Lord, help us to see those things and not live just in our freedom, knowing that we are going to be saved and that we're going to go to heaven, but help us to live with the stewardship of the gospel that's been given to us, that we would manage it well. with our lives and the way we live. We love you and thank you for all that you do for us, Lord. And it's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Thank you so much. I'll see you next time.